women's chances, according to one scholar she mentioned, which put the onus on women to throttle back their authentic selves to serve the biased expectations of men, and some women. That game-playing perpetuates rather than challenges the gender bias embedded in the workplace and in society in general, and Sandberg acknowledged this paradox. Elizabeth Warren is not one to re-engineer her focused communication style or tenaciousness in order to adhere to expectations about what is appropriate for fighting for an issue. Since discovering her mission to put her expertise about the financial hardships of the middle class into practice, Warren has never lost the sense of urgency that first gripped her around the issue. She knew that about herself when she entered the Senate in 2013. "I came knowing that large parts of what I understood about how the Senate worked would never work for me," she told Time magazine in 2015. "I would not have that kind of time, but more importantly, America's middle class did not have that kind of time." For Elizabeth Warren, the clock is always ticking. Among the surprises that unfolded in Warren's story was the impact her bankruptcy research had on her evolution as a scholar, and, as I frame it, a public intellectual who feels compelled to bring her work to the public square. Writing for general audiences instead of limiting her work to law journals was another form of teaching, which had been her goal since grade school. The more her research taught her about people whose financial peril brought them to the bankruptcy courts, the more she peeled away her own assumptions about America's most indebted and down and out. Her work changed her to the point that she shifted from a Republican to a card-carrying Democrat. Another transformational piece of her story goes back to coming of age in the early and mid-1960s. Elizabeth was too young to be influenced and empowered by the feminism that was only beginning to sprout. Instead, like so many of her generation, she struggled with the clash between the Betty Crocker model of ideal female wholeness and her inner spark to get out in the world and try something. I found that struggle just as telling about who Elizabeth Warren is as the tale of her rise from a dusty, financially strapped Oklahoma childhood to academic and political prominence. She had to find her own way through those critical years when her heart was pulled in two directions with equal, searing force. There were no easy answers or foolproof roadmaps, only choices to make and the tenacity to work through them. At about 7 o'clock on February 7, 2017, a handful of senators were debating about President Donald Trump's nominee for U.S. Attorney General, their colleague, Jeff Sessions. It had been a long day amid fevered weeks of arguments by Democrats against Sessions' confirmation, recalling his record of suppressing black votes when he was Attorney General in Alabama in the 1980s and 90s. That evening, Elizabeth Warren stood at the podium dressed in one of her signature buttonless suit jackets, this one blue, with collar slightly up, over a black top and pants. 20 minutes into her talk, she began to read a letter written in 1986 by Coretta Scott King, Martin Luther King Jr.'s widow, to the Senate Judicial Committee. That year, the committee was deliberating about confirming Jeff Sessions as a federal judge, and Mrs. King's letter expressed her brief but pointed reasons against his confirmation. One sentence stated, "Mr. Sessions has used the awesome power of his office to chill the free exercise of the vote by black citizens." Republican Senator Steve Daines from Montana, who was presiding as the chair, knocked his gavel 3 times to stop Warren from speaking. The senator is reminded that it is a violation of Rule 19 of the Standing Rules of the Senate to impute another senator or senators, he said, any conduct or motive unworthy of becoming a senator. The rule reads, unbecoming. The process around Rule 19 is 2 strikes, you're out. First, you get a warning, and if your insults to a fellow senator continue, you get told to sit down. The rule, explained retired Senator Barbara Mikulski, dated back to the early 1900s, when men used to come to the Senate floor, if they were working late, either drunk or making terrible, insulting comments about another senator's family, usually a spouse.